Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heart lines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and we're visiting with Dr. Jerome R. Corsi, author of the newly released WND book, Partners in Crime, The Clinton Scheme to Monetize the White House for Personal Profit. Dr. Corsi, welcome to the program.
Great to be with you, Rabbi. Really a pleasure. Thank you.
Dr. Corsi received his PhD from Harvard University in political science in 1972. He was a senior staff writer for WND, where he worked as an investigative journalist from 2004 to 2017, and is now the Washington bureau chief for InfoWars. In 2004, Dr. Corsi co-authored with John O'Neill the #1 New York Times bestseller, Unfit for Command, Swift Boat Veteran Speak Out Against John Kerry. In 2008, he authored the #1 New York Times bestseller, The Abomination, Leftist Politics and the Cult of Personality. Since then, he has devoted his time to writing on politics and economics, two fields in which he has considerable experience. In his career, he has written 6 New York Times best-selling non-fiction books. Dr. Corsi, quite a CV, quite a curriculum vitae on your background of continuing to contribute to trying to wake up a slumbering nation. A nation that has been led down this, almost the stick, the carrot, and the donkey. I just don't understand what's going on. Help me.
Well, I've been fighting for years, and I guess my whole career, to trying to get the truth to the American people. I was greatly honored when I did Unfit for Command to co-author the book with John O'Neill, who was a Swift Boat vet and took over John Kerry's Swift Boat when John Kerry left Vietnam. And there we were battling the meme that the Vietnam War was the war of Genghis Khan, that we were the aggressor, when those who went and fought in Vietnam fought for freedom. They fought for democracy. They were not the war of Genghis Khan. Yes, there are atrocities in every war that are regrettable, but they weren't excused. And the American troops that fought there fought with valor. And it was basically John Kerry and the Vietnam veterans against the war with a lying KGB made-up disinformation campaign that we were the aggressors, that we were savaging the population, burning villages. All these things, I think, needed correction. And that book gave us an opportunity to get on the record. Great honor to represent the Swift Boat veterans and to have them speak forward that, to the honor of their service.
Yes.
Not the disgrace that the far left wanted to portray it as. And that's been the continuing battle to try to uphold the fundamental constitutional principles upon which the United States was founded, and to explore in various avenues the attacks from the hard left, which are intensifying and are now, I think have reached a peak with the Hillary Clinton campaign in 2016. That's why I wrote this book, Partners in Crime, and with Donald Trump's victory. And Donald Trump is still being besieged by the deep state and the hard left.
Yes.
The battle's not by any means over. But I think what's at stake are fundamental freedoms, and very importantly, the First Amendment, the right to have freedom of religion, freedom of speech. Second Amendment, right to bear arms. Fourth Amendment, the right to be secure in your own property. It just goes down the list, because the left does not have any respect or tolerance for these fundamental freedoms.
But yet they avail themselves of the protection of the Constitution, the benefits of our federal systems, the entitlement programs that they continue to fight for the preservation. They're the highest consumers of abortion, the highest consumers of drugs, the highest consumers of illegal immigration. They are the proponents of sanctuary cities, which is perpetuating a condition of lawlessness in defiance of the federal government. It's tantamount to treason. And yet we sweep it under the carpet. We call it the two coasts seem to be enamored with this, and the mainstream American doesn't want it, but they feel ill-equipped to fight it, and they take a defeatist attitude when we are in a country that majority rules. And we're not talking about popular vote in a presidential election. I still am so suspicious of those results. into a corrupt party system that has garnered favor for cash and political appointments. And now we have Washington, where the head is fine, but the body is cancerous, and the brain is active and alive, and Donald Trump, the cabinet. And so from the shoulders up, we're a very healthy nation. But from the shoulders down, we are wallowing in a cesspool of corruption. And you've seen this firsthand.
Well, Rabbi, the United States was founded on Judeo-Christian principles, and you see them in the Bible, which of course the far left wants to ban from the United States, ban from our schools. And the Constitution was designed to preserve liberties and to allow free speech and freedom of religion, which the left cannot tolerate, because this left is really a Maoist, increasingly a Maoist hard left. And the Maoist hard left is engaged in being intolerant given their principles, which are essentially to restrict freedom and to have the collective or the state be dominant. It's always resulted in economic ruin, murder, horrendous crimes. But the left continues to return to these themes as if they can succeed where everyone since the Russian Revolution has failed, and Venezuela is another example of classic failure. The points of the Bible open up to anyone who studies Judeo-Christian tradition tolerance of views that are not consistent with your own, and it even allows the left to have this unfair advantage, as it were, of being able to having to be tolerated, and we tolerate the those who want to espouse a Maoist or communist line or far left line, but we don't agree with them. And the left, if they were to win, you can see it in the schools. They want to shut down anyone who disagrees with them. They want to call you an Islamophobe if you want to oppose radical Islam. They want to characterize you as a sexist if you want to be pro-life. These are the kinds of issues that the left is using as a series of disinformation tactics.
Yes.
That are, and again, the biblical roots of it is, Lucifer, the bearer of light, is the father of lies. And these are the twisting that the left does in order to gain followers who say, well, why can't a woman choose? Well, a woman can choose, and the time to choose is before there's a pregnancy. And at that time, yes, everyone has a right to choose. If you're going to engage in acts which are going to lead to procreation, I think you have to take responsibility for these acts. And that's where the right is very different. The right is concerned with responsibility as well as liberty. And the left wants it to be this, anything you want goes, until the left gets in power. Then the useful idiots who have supported the left are usually the first to be killed. Mm-hmm. And it shocks me that feminists on the left support radical Islam when it's so horrendously brutal to women. And they ignore the mutilization of sex organs. They ignore the forbidding women to be educated, beating women. It goes on and on and on. And yet the left embraces radical Islam because it's anti-American, on the principle that the enemy of my enemy, is my friend. So therefore, you see this unholy alliance. I think David Horowitz has been very brilliant in expressing this, between radical Islam and the hard left Maoists, which have combined in their hatred of America.
I'm reading the Declaration of Independence sitting right in front of me. I keep it in my Bible by my side. And it's so extraordinary, the selection of words, because we're actually in the same period of time we were in on July 4th, 1776. When they wrote, when in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with one another, and to assume among the powers of the earth a separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The left has removed 1/3 of the unalienable rights, and that is life.
Well, I've always considered those to be almost God-inspired words. I mean, they're so perfectly framed. They have so much thought condensed in them. And, the Founding Fathers realized that in the rebellion against King George and Great Britain that they were risking their lives, and they were doing so because they were articulating that there are standards higher than government, and our rights do not derive from government but from God. Now, what's going on today is the hard left wants to eliminate God, erase God from the public square, meaning that you can read your Bible as long as you do it in a closet in your home and don't tell anybody about it. It cannot inspire or advise the actions you take. You certainly can't say God or pray to God before a football game.
Right.
These are, I think, the kinds of extreme measures where in human history, human beings, I believe, have an inherent sense of God. I mean, one of my proofs that human beings can't live without God, or that God exists, is you cannot affirm to be an atheist without saying a word that affirms the existence of God. Atheist includes the concept of God.
Yes.
So you can't deny God without affirming God, and there's no way to express that you're an atheist without affirming God, and that to me that's kind of almost like a Wittgensteinian concept. It's embedded in the nature of how we are wired for language and thinking.
So
well,
you're aware that atheists have a national holiday, right?
Right. Well, I mean, atheists. I think atheists in general are denying what is to most human beings a recognized fact. Even children. I mean, even children are born with a fundamental sense of morality.
Yes.
I've experienced and noticed animals have a fundamental sense of morality, what's right and wrong, and how they react to human beings. And the fundamental nature of who we are and the recognition of who we are as human beings, and I think that this is the fundamental to the Judeo-Christian tradition, is that we understand that we are not supreme. It's God who's supreme.
Yes.
That is, the Lord's Prayer, thy will be done. And the left wants to assert that God doesn't exist so that human beings can be put on that throne. And it doesn't work. Human beings that try to create these perfect systems end up with intolerant, totalitarian systems. I think Dinesh D'Souza and Jonah Goldberg have done some very good work pointing out that fascism is National Socialism was on the left. The Nazis were leftists.
Right.
And created an intolerant condition of state and opposed to the communists, who are also leftists. The right is really characterized by a freedom to be right or to be wrong. But the freedoms are inherent in that we acknowledge that our wisdom is limited. No matter how brilliant we may think we are limited compared to the intelligence of God. And we aspire to create structures which are in accordance with God's will, knowing that our structures are imperfect. Our founding fathers, at the very core of the creation of the Constitution, from the beginning, wanted a limited form of government because they feared government too powerful would inevitably corrupt itself. So we had a balance of powers: the legislative, the judicial, the executive, and making it. You hear President Trump being frustrated that he can't get a bill through Congress, and that's the way our founding fathers meant it to be. They meant it to be difficult. They meant it to be hard to accomplish anything. And when the Democrats passed Obamacare by forcing the last votes and all the buying of votes and everything they did, they were really perverting what the Constitution established as the legislative power, which would have been legislators who were not professional politicians, not there to make a fortune, and there to vote their conscience, not to be coerced to vote the party line. And these are issues, I think, that fundamentally those who observe American politics, like I do, understand that the frustration of getting things accomplished is inherent to the thinking of our founding fathers, who based it on the fact that we as human beings are inclined to do the wrong things all the time.
When we look at the wealth in Washington and the statistics that come out about the lining of the pockets, that people who supposedly come from an obscure background that get elected to Congress, all of a sudden their net worth skyrockets. Where does all this money come from?
Well, see, this is the kind of thing that I think is most objectionable to the average American, is that when you look at the net worth of these politicians, John McCain, who married into the Kemper-Marley crime family in Arizona and ended up with a wife who had the Budweiser franchise out of that, and dropped a family where his wife, coming out of Vietnam, suffered a car accident and was physically not the woman he had married when he left for Vietnam. These kinds of things American people say are really fundamentally disgusting. I mean, going to Washington and becoming wealthy. Basically, Harry Truman understood that anyone in Washington who gains wealth is doing it crookedly, one way or the other. I've been railing against Bob Corker in Tennessee, who wants to destroy Fannie and Freddie. Fannie and Freddie were robbed by Obama to pay the Obamacare subsidies that Congress would not fund. And Fannie and Freddie, I think, are fundamental to home ownership. 30-year fixed-rate mortgage is key to first-time home buyers. I've been fighting against Corker, who wants to, he's basically the senator from Wells Fargo.
Right.
Made millions of dollars in deals with investment bankers and Wells Fargo and Bank of America, and wants to take the whole mortgage market and give it over to Wells Fargo, the big banks, and Wall Street, which will end up with us becoming a nation of renters. And I've even found the documents from Geithner's Treasury where the Obama administration said, well, we need to become a nation of renters. We don't need to be a nation of homeowners. These are the kinds of things that corrupt our politics when someone like Corker decides he can make millions of dollars and become wealthy, basically promoting the interests of big banks and Wall Street. And, it's shocking, but the Democrats have also now completely embraced the big banks and Wall Street. That's fundamental to what we'll be talking about here in my book on the partners in crime.
Yes.
And that's fundamentally a fascist. The fascists differed from the communists, and the fascists wanted big business, but they wanted to control it from government, whereas the communists wanted big business to be owned by the people. They did not want private property. That was the main difference. And today's Democratic Party, I think Dinesh Seuss is right, owes its legacy, its Maoist type of extremism, hard left, to the same kind of formula that Nazi Germany used. And Hitler was the first to have universal health care. I mean, all of this kind of goes together classically, and that a fascist society, a hard left society, the top will be benefited. Hillary Clinton will be wealthy. The middle class will go away, and most people will suffer.
They espouse a tolerance mentality, but they hate the right. They have this destroy Trump. They have an agenda which is diabolical, and it's the antithesis of their message.
Well, see, I also interpret that as that the left is now, I think, increasingly desperate. And as they get desperate, they're going to get more strident, they're going to get more intolerant, they're going to get more violent, more fringe. Look at who's currently running the Democratic Party. You've got Tom Perez, who is a La Raza lawyer from Maryland, persecuted Sheriff Joe Arpaio in Arizona because Sheriff Arpaio wanted to enforce immigration laws, and Keith Ellison, who was a Louis Farrakhan, Nation of Islam from Michigan, Muslim, black Muslim. These are the people running the Democratic Party. Well, this is fringe. This is so marginal and so filled with hate. I mean, Tom Perez increasingly even looks like Lenin when I see him on television. And the point is that these people are not tolerant. They don't want to hear what the right has to say. God offends them, so it's almost like the crucifix or whatever in an exorcism. It sears them just to see it. These are the kinds of things that I think the Judeo-Christian tradition has got to withhold and stand for the values that are traditional. To say no, we don't hate Islam. I mean, I walked 200 miles in 2005 after I wrote Atomic Iran with the Muslims from Iran who wanted freedom in their country. But radical Islam, the extreme Islam, the jihadists, these are what have to be opposed because they have gone so far in their hatred of the West that they want to destroy Western civilization. And when I was at Harvard, I had the honor and benefit of studying with Sam Huntington, and Sam Huntington was the first to warn that we were headed towards a clash of civilizations. And I think that that's what's brewing. That's what's in the works. And as Muslims, radical Islam takes increasing hold of Europe, and the Europeans, in their abandonment of their fundamental core traditional moral values and God, are vulnerable to this attack with the political correct attitude imposed on them from the left, that it's going to take, I think, someone like a Donald Trump, someone like we're fighting for on the conservative right, in order to uphold the traditional values into the future. And I think we'll win, but I think it's going to be a desperate battle. And I, fear that we're going to be having Iran emerge, we'll be having nuclear war before we're done.
Yeah, this is just the precursor of a glimpse of what's going to come out of the Middle East with this Russian involvement. I think the Russia situation has escalated, but we left the door wide open when I always called John Kerry Lurch. If you remember from the old TV show, the guy that just said you rang, and he went on the worldwide apology tour like LaToya Jackson.
Right.
It was embarrassing that Barack Hussein Obama took such a submissive attitude to the world powers and put America in the most vulnerable position that in my lifetime, since 1952, that I've ever known. I've never felt more vulnerable as an American, and my domestic tranquility is no longer tranquil.
Well, Barack Obama had the left's apologizing for America. He, rather than seeing us as a nation that emerged from the Civil War abolishing slavery, he blames us for slavery in the first place, without blaming the Muslim slaveholders and slave traders in Africa or the tribal leaders that allowed the slavery to go on. Slavery was such a massive sin that there's plenty of culpability to go around, but the judgment of a sin of that magnitude is, the fact that we ended it.
What role did Barack Obama play in enabling this Clinton cartel, this Clinton organized crime cartel?
Yes. Well, Barack Obama was a complete facilitator. I mean, I think the compromise or the deal that was made in 2008 when Hillary lost was that Barack Obama was going to accept Hillary in as Secretary of State and allow the Clinton Foundation to thrive. And the Clintons were, instead of undermining Obama, would wait their turn and run in 2016. And in exchange, Barack Obama and the Justice Department would do nothing to investigate or to stop the Clintons and their massive criminal enterprises that they were going to run through the Clinton Foundation. And we've seen that. And we've also seen that Barack Obama embraced radical Muslim Brotherhood, destabilizing Libya and supporting Morsi in Egypt. And Hillary went right along with that, packing the State Department with radical Islamic supporters. They're still there in large number. And these are the issues where Hillary was happy to destabilize Libya, moved into Egypt with Morsi, was ready to support ISIS when it first began. And I've maintained from the very beginning that the Clintons and Obama were out of the Muslim Brotherhood, the father and mother of ISIS. And this horror of radical Islam visited upon the Middle East and the rest of the world was fueled by this pact between Barack Obama, who I'm not sure he has any religion, but I think culturally Barack Obama is much more comfortable in a Muslim context. It was obvious in his speech in Cairo where he said he'd experienced Islam on three continents. I don't see any real Christian roots to Obama, and I remember a speech he gave that's been suppressed where he ridiculed the Bible and did that in public. So Barack Obama his goal was the promotion of Islam. He was radical left. Hillary's equally radical left. They're both Saul Alinsky acolytes, and they combined in that Obama would get to spread Islam, radical Islam. Hillary would cooperate, and the Clintons would get to be fantastically wealthy through running this criminal foundation, and Hillary would have her chance to be president in 2016. Well, the deal almost worked out if it had not been for Donald Trump, and those of us who worked so hard to defeat Hillary and to support Donald Trump. And the mass of middle America, I think the common sense of this country is still there, which can see a fraud for a fraud. And when you heard all the rallies where lock her up, and build the wall and drain the swamp, well, these were all reactions to Hillary and Obama, where the average American could see through their hypocrisy and their corruption.
Well, you're exactly right. There's so many stories to cover. This one is so fascinating to me because it's reminiscent of the mob families of prior history, that J. Edgar Hoover role was given to J. Edgar Hoover to take on organized crime. This is the origin of the RICO Act and being able to go after organized crime. And this has I think Americans are much more aware of what a criminal enterprise looks like. There are so many investigations that should have gone on that haven't gone on, but I understand that many of them are being refreshed, that they're looking in. But then you and I both read this former New York Times reporter comes out and says that an attorney on the Clinton team says that there's a plea deal in place should there be any prosecution.
Well, see, the problem with American history since World War II and probably before, I trace a lot of it to the CIA. I mean, the fact is that the intelligence agencies have been running the drug business since the British in the 1880s decided to ship opium into China, and they did it through Iran. The Namazi family was a big family in that. Valerie Jarrett was born in a Namazi hospital. Namazi in the United States was one of the big funders for Hillary and for John Kerry. He's now in federal prison for bank fraud. I wrote extensively about him in Atomic Iran. And, the drug business out of World War II coming out of Southeast Asia, John Kennedy was aware of it. John Kennedy tried to stay out of Vietnam. He knew the CIA wanted to run drugs. We're still doing it. I broke the story on HSBC John Cruz, a bank officer, came out with 1,000 pages of documents that HSBC was laundering money. Was the only journalist who could get to pay attention to him. I published it. It ends up with, HSBC paying a $1.9 billion fine, but again, it's fixed. The Comey, the FBI director, was on the board of HSBC. Mueller was the head of the FBI, and Loretta Lynch was the U.S. Assistant Attorney General who arranged the $1.9 billion fine to HSBC, and nobody went to jail. And these are the kinds of corruptions, that go back. And one of the reasons I've been so fascinated with the Kennedy assassination is the lies told in official history and how official history works to cover up the powers that be. And the CIA paying journalists, which the Church Committee exposed.
Right.
Operation Mockingbird. We today have a partisan government-paid mainstream media that is going to attack Trump because he threatens the narrative which allows the criminals, including in the government, to continue their criminal activity. And this is something that's going to be very painful and very difficult to expose over the next few years, but I've been doing everything I can writing about it and pointing it out and trying to document it to people. But I think today there's a much greater understanding of how corrupt the CIA truly is and how corrupt the Democratic Party has become, and the Republican Party equally in its establishment wing in D.C. The American people, I think, Donald Trump was not a win for the GOP. It was a win for independence. It was a win for the Constitution, the average American, who is not considering themselves either a Democrat or a Republican. And we're seeing fundamental reevaluations all across the board. This is a time of great upheaval. But if we come through it, it can be a time of great reawakening.
Dr. Corsi, if you stole China from the White House, what would happen to you?
Well, yeah, of course. Well, of course, that's how I open up the Partners in Crime, is that the Clintons walked out with the China and furniture. I mean, they stole thousands of dollars worth of property that belongs to the people of the United States, their national treasures, and ultimately they were caught and had to return a lot of that or pay for it. And this is part of the difficulty with people like Clintons, is they can't distinguish between what they legitimately own and what belongs to somebody else.
Right.
And so you fundamentally are dealing with these are signals of pathological psychology. Sociopaths can't tell right from wrong. And the Clintons have displayed this trailer park trash mentality as grifters of the worst and lowest kind, lying, cheating, stealing, not seeming to have any recognition that there's anything wrong with this kind of behavior. And that's distinguished them, Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, since they have been on the public scene. I'm sure it was what attracted them to get together in the first place, was a shared sociopathic pathology, which made them brother and sister to begin with.
It's just an extraordinary, long-standing story going back to Arkansas that has been developing, and America has just been spoon-fed this Clinton story to the tune of 64 million Americans voting for her in this last election. How could half the adult voting population of this country not recognize a career criminal family?
I think it's an indication of the degree to which our moral and educational system has been perverted. I think you come through the public schools today and you're not taught the fundamental moral principles that our forefathers had to begin with. So this generation, the millennial generation, has got to be in a sense educated or brought to an awareness of fundamental moral issues, where it's not just clever to lie, it's not clever to steal, it's not excusable to do whatever you want to do. That the Clintons, just because they're celebrities, don't live with a different set of values than the rest of us. That's the kind of, because they hold lavish parties with rock stars, they're supposed to be able themselves to engage in drugs and stealing and theft and all kinds of other behavior morally that would be unacceptable for the average person. And, it's not a celebrity status that changes morals. It doesn't change the morals. It doesn't excuse the behavior. Americans vote on celebrity. Americans vote on name. And it's not surprising. One of the reasons our founding fathers did not create this as a true democracy but a constitutional republic was that they were very afraid of how people could herd vote when they got an idea in their heads that was not thoroughly or critically examined. The ancient history, going back to Thucydides, is filled with many examples where the mob voted wrong. And that's what the American founding fathers, again, wanted to make sure was not going to be repeated.
When William Jefferson Clinton stood before this country and said vehemently, I did not have with this woman, and was found guilty in a court, in a civil case. He was found, he was impeached by the House, and the Senate failed to remove him from office.
Right.
This is the height, the breadth, the depth, and the width of corruption at the highest possible levels, and yet there was no outcry. It was the same silent response to my daughter at 28 years old having to tolerate a man walk into her bathroom because of his problems.
Well, even if you take first of all, most people don't realize that Clinton was impeached.
Yes.
He was not removed from office, but he was impeached. It's a two-step process.
Yes.
When the House voted to bring him to trial, that's what impeachment's about. Removal from office. No president's been removed from office. And I think it's a very high threshold to get a president removed from office. I'm not sure we'll ever see it happen. But the disgrace of being brought to trial should be a mark for the rest of your life. The Clintons, of course, seem to brush all of this off, which I attribute to their sociopathic behavior. They don't take any consequences from being caught lying, cheating, stealing. The fundamental issue with Bill Clinton, if you look through, he started in Arkansas. He was working with the CIA, running drugs from Colombia, running in part of the whole Danny Escobar, the whole Escobar cocaine deal was run through Arkansas when he was governor. Then he goes on into the White House, and his whole career is begun with finding ways to enrich themselves. The Clintons, as I pointed out in Partners in Crime, are always pleading that they're poor. Hillary gets $10 million for a book deal, and she's saying she's poor. They never they can't have enough money, because at this kind of psychology, they are fundamentally poor in their souls, and they never feel secure, no matter how much money they have, because money is not going to provide security to these kinds of psychologies. They have a sickness for more. Now, when the Clinton Foundation was set up, and when Bill Clinton, was leaving office and pardoning Mark Rich, that was the real beginning of the pay-for-play scheme, because Mark Rich's wife donated money to the Clinton Library, to the Hillary's Senate campaign. It was investigated for 5 or 6 years. And again, Robert Mueller, who's now the special counselor, ended the grand jury in the Mark Rich case. And Comey, FBI director, was one of the lead prosecutors. They exonerated the Clintons. They said no crime was committed. Well, from the very beginning, the Clintons set up this foundation and were cheating the National Archives and how they built the library. I pointed that out.
Yes,
and then then the book goes through all kinds of scams. I mean, I just take them one after the other. I begin, I think, with the profiting in India, where the Clintons, find that there is a earthquake in India in 2001, and so basically they rush to the scene and say, we're going to raise millions of dollars for the victims of the earthquake, and then they hook up with the Indian criminals, and they end up stealing hundreds of millions of dollars. They raise like $1 billion, and virtually none of it goes to the earthquake relief.
Now, this is the situation where Bill Clinton says, I'm going to move here. I'm going to.
Yes. He said he was going to move there. They do things like they set up organizations registered, under the American India Foundation. Well, it's a felony for an organization to hold itself out as a nonprofit organization that's not duly authorized by the IRS to offer tax-deductible contributions. Well, when you look at the registration of the American India Foundation, it's not clear it was ever registered as a charity. It's not clear that the Clinton Foundation was given a letter authorizing it to raise money for this earthquake. You can't just suddenly have a charity and have it go do whatever you want to do. You get a determination letter from the IRS and says you're a charity for the following purposes. And then the Clintons go to Davos, which is the World Economic Forum, and
right.
they get the bright idea they can run their own Davos scam, so they create the Clinton Global Initiative, and now they are inviting CEOs in countries all over the world to come on the stage in New York every year and talk about how many millions they're going to give to charitable purposes, none of which are registered, or there's no letter of determination for any of these. The Clinton Global Initiative is not really registered as a charity. All the registrations, all the official documentation you've got to go through to obtain IRS approval, when it's found out they don't have it, they get it retroactively. And so, you begin with the Clintons feeling they don't have to follow this. They can declare charity, they can raise billions of dollars, and they don't have to be accountable for what's done with the money. When they get to Africa and they decide they're going to tackle HIV and AIDS, they end up working with UnitAid, which is a tax scheme largely supported by France and by the World Health Organization. They rake in, again, hundreds of billions of dollars, and they buy defective drugs out of India, AIDS medicine, that wouldn't cure anybody. And they ship that to Africa and claim they've solved the problem of AIDS. And have some fancy public relations brochures where Bill Clinton and Hillary and Chelsea get photo ops in Africa.
Right.
They fly in for the photo ops and they leave. And the entity that's supposed to be delivering all these benefits is this little tiny office in South Boston that it doesn't even have a sign on it what it's doing. You can't find out how many people work there or what they're doing. And the whole thing is structured to be a scam. That's the problem, is that the accounting is falsified, that there are so many crimes involved in what the Clintons have done with the Clinton Foundation. And I document it very thoroughly in the book. And I'm documenting it from all kinds of credible sources. I mean, I went and found all the filings. We are quoting the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, major investigative sources that have looked at this. And the Clinton Foundation is well known to be a criminal enterprise. It's just that no one will prosecute.
Which is just so extraordinary that somebody has held themselves out to be above the law. This is a slap in the face of every American. I went up and pulled the 990s last night on the Clinton Foundation. Several years in a row, unaudited statements. Therefore, they are not within the boundaries of a 990 filing at the level that they are. Excuse me. We file a 990. We're a nonprofit teaching ministry, And this is
Right.
the media branch of a teaching ministry. But I have to account for everything. Our statements have to go up there. It's not just a postcard anymore. When we first started out, we were too small, and we sent a postcard. Now we do the full 990 filing. But their 2016 is not there. And their 2015 is not an audited statement. Well, this is a violation of IRS regulations. I know that I would be getting a notification, and I would look at that notification, and it would make me nervous, and I would call my attorney, and I would call our accountant and say, you got to fix this. But I'm sure that they're like the old abandoned house where the mail goes through the mail slot, it's piling up on the floor, and they've got notices that are automated from a system, but they don't pay any attention to it, and they're nothing but scofflaws and career criminals.
Well, anyone who's going to legitimately run a foundation knows how strict the rules are, both in terms of reporting and in terms of what you can do with the money.
Right.
And it's a federal crime and state crime, inurement, if you take out too much of the money for your own personal lifestyle or for your own compensation. You have to have very strict guidelines as to how much you're legitimately allowed to take from the foundation for personal use. Whereas the Clintons had lavish travel, paid themselves huge salaries, paid all their cronies, put them one way or another in the foundation, created, consulting organizations that, like Teneo,
Right.
run by Doug Band, the body man for Bill Clinton in the White House, and then passed clients back and forth. If you were a client of Clinton Foundation, you had to be Clinton Global Initiative and then Teneo, and if you paid all these people, you got favors. And that's, I think, the great scam of the chapter I wrote on the Canada scam, where Frank Giustra, who was a penny stock dealer, ends up creating this energy company and getting Bill Clinton to go with him to Kazakhstan. Well, Kazakhstan happens to be the world leading producer of uranium, and they start getting uranium contracts. They build this company into Uranium One with all kinds of questionable stock manipulations to get it to be a major company. They get 20% of U.S. uranium in production under contract, and they allow Russia's energy agency, Rosatom, to buy into this, ultimately to own it 100%. They take the company before the Committee on Investment for the United States, which is the Treasury Department committee on which the State Department sits. Hillary doesn't attend the meeting. She appoints somebody to attend the meeting. They vote for the State Department approval of the deal, along with the other 8 or 9 agencies on this committee, and 20% of the U.S. uranium ends up in Russia. And at the same time, the Clintons get exorbitant speaking fees for their foundation. They have charitable donations coming in through Canada that are not listed by who's donating from Canada. Money coming in certainly from foreign countries through Canada. And the entity in Canada is not even appropriately registered as a charity in Canada or in the United States.
Right.
So now you've got a transnational fraud going on, which they should be accountable for, even if the Justice Department doesn't want to prosecute them. You should be able to get France and UnitAid, Canada and these foundations in Canada, and a dozen other countries, the African countries that were scammed over the HIV. All these countries have causes of action against the Clintons and could easily file criminal charges against this foundation.
What's most concerning to me, Dr. Corsi, is not only are they partners in crime of financial proportion and fiduciary violations of trust, they are heavily involved in this Epstein, Orgy Island, pedophilia, and apparently this goes pretty deep into Washington circles, and that has got me so incensed.
Well, the Jeffrey Epstein ran this fantasy kind of island type of sex paradise where they had underage sex with, you know, boys and girls underage. This was the whole appeal of this sex island that Jeffrey Epstein ran. There's been numerous charges, and he's been charged. The Clintons, this one implicates the Clintons, both of them, in pedophilia. What are they doing riding in Jeffrey Epstein's airplane, going to this island if they don't know the whole island is a pedophilia paradise? Now, again, it's the definition of themselves as celebrities, or in their own view as beyond the average person's moral code, which is characteristic of the sociopath. It's a characteristic pathological problem when the person says, well, you obey those laws and that's what keeps you enslaved. I'm above those laws. I can have sex with whomever I want to have sex with. And at that type, the idea that there's a God's law, or that there is a natural right, or that the violation of a child's innocence is a violation of that child's fundamental rights, which are being abused for the pedophile's pleasure. All of these things are beyond the sociopath's ability to conceptualize. And it goes together. I mean, someone who's going to be committing these kind of massive financial crimes, being willing to facilitate a drug trade, and then to engage in sexual aberrations. These are the kinds of things that unfortunately tend to associate in personalities like the Clintons. And yet they, in the Democratic Party, remain at the highest level of esteem and are promoted as if they're, should be American heroes.
Dr. Corsi, we're actually out of time, but I want you to take 1 minute. We're going to go over in this segment, but 1 minute to give a call to action. What can we do about the Clintons? What can we do about this rampant corruption that's existing in Washington circles?
Well, I mean, my answer has always been pretty much the same. First of all, pray. It's got to start with prayer. And secondly, expose the truth. So spend the time reading, my book, Partners in Crime. You'll have Peter Schweitzer's book, which is following the Clinton money trail. And all of these efforts to expose the truth about this corruption, the average person needs to be willing to delve into it and to learn the truth and to do it with an open mind. And I think if that's done, in the end, I always tell people, and I always try to conclude these with however dark it seems, always remember that in the end, God wins.
Amen. Amen. We've been talking with Dr. Jerome R. Corsi, Partners in Crime from WND Books, the Clinton scheme to monetize the White House for personal profit. I encourage you, go to the WND Superstore right now. When you check out, put in the code IAN. That's IAN for Igniting a Nation. And you'll be blessing both Dr. Corsi, WND, and Igniting a Nation's ministry. It costs you nothing more, but we get blessed. And Dr. Corsi, we so thank you for being with us here on Revealing the Truth. I know that I've been watching some of the comments come in, great feedback and great interest in what you're doing. Partners in Crime is just a rock-solid read. It's about time that we blew the lid off this Clinton cartel and made America great again.
Well, God bless you, Rabbi, and God bless your audience, and thank you for the opportunity to be with you today.
Thank you so much. And that brings to a conclusion our live broadcast day, but that doesn't mean we go off the air. We broadcast here at Revealing the Truth, our studios in Birmingham, Alabama, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. This segment, as well as all the segments from the prior shows, will be rebroadcast all throughout the day and throughout the weekend. You'll catch Paul Nealon, who is the congressman running for the 1st District in Wisconsin. You're going to hear Dr. Jerome Corsi, WND authors, both of them partners in crime, the Clinton scheme to monetize the White House for personal profit. We encourage you to join us back here Monday morning at 9 a.m. Central Time when we begin our live broadcast week right here in Birmingham, Alabama. Until we see you back here on Monday, we wish you a Shabbat Shalom and a Shavua Tov. Have a great week, and we'll see you next week. Shalom.